So we're live. Thanks a lot, everyone, for being here. I'm here with Maryam Henein. Am I saying your last name right?
Henein.
Henein?
It's like inane, like the word inane.
Okay, completely wrong pronunciation. Okay, Henein. Okay, and she's been on my show before. She's an investigative journalist and has been investigating the Floyd situation that transpired and has a tremendous amount of research and backing information about it. And so we're going to go down that rabbit hole today. And I've just had some breaking news. It's on my front page of my website, projectcamelotportal.com. So you can go there to see that. I have compiled some articles about this WHO meeting that's taking place on the 22nd of this month on May, where they're saying that Biden is going to be turning over the American sovereignty to the WHO. Whether or not that's actually true or going to happen is anyone's guess. I imagine it's not going to happen, but that's what they're saying. And at the same time, the WHO has now done some very interesting thing and had a meeting with a reptilian in the presence with American military officers and California executives. And that meeting was leaked to me. So I have posted it there, the details that we have so far. And that would be pulling the alien card as far as I can tell. And then simultaneously, we got an announcement that the House Intelligence Committee has pulled together a meeting on UAPs or UFOs to happen on, it's an open meeting and it's going to happen on the 17th of May. So this is the breaking news, and now we're going to get to Maryam's information. Maryam, welcome, and it's lovely to have you here. Why don't you give yourself a short introduction and then just leap into all of the information that you wanted to share?
Sure, thank you. Thank you for having me, Carrie. So I'm an investigative journalist, not a parrot or prostitute. I'm best known for directing a film called Vanishing of the Bees. I'm also a functional medicine consultant and coach. I used to be with the mainstream. My career started at MSNBC before I quit. And I appreciate anyone who gives me a voice in these very censored times. And as you noted, I have been covering the George Floyd multi-layered PSYOP for almost 2 years now. And I would just want to preface that I understand people have George Floyd fatigue, but I'm looking at court documents that are coming out every day, just a few moments ago, because one of the officers, the 3 officers, are about to have the state trial, and they just finished the federal trial. Derek Chauvin was just sentenced on a federal level to 20 to 25 years, which will be served concurrently with the state conviction. And there's also an appellant brief. They're appealing. Derek's new lawyer, who I'm in talks with, just put out an 82-page appellant brief, basically outlining all the blunders of our justice system, if anyone's paying attention to the reasons why there should be a new trial or this should be acquitted. So in the meanwhile, because of this George Floyd incident, there are more bills in circulation that have been amended, and we are really moving forward towards a police state where we determine someone's guilt or innocence based on an angle of a camera, and they're eliciting emotional responses. And I believe very firmly that Derek Chauvin, as well as the other officers in the federal trial, did not get a fair trial. And I believe that's our constitutional right.
Okay. Well, that's a great summary.
Yes.
Now, I know you definitely have some more detail to share, because a lot of people have kind of maybe felt that this thing was closed and a done deal. So let's go down the rabbit hole with it.
Yes. So I have obtained footage that has never been seen before to people on this planet that give away certain details that are overlooked. One of the things that I've looked into, or I suspected, was that Maurice Lester Hall was an informant. And I now have gathered proof, which I will offer in my book, which will be published by Logosophia. I'm also putting together a short film, putting together all the footage that I've acquired. So for instance, I've obtained Derek Chauvin's body-worn camera. It conveniently fell underneath the car, Squad 320. And when I asked if any other journalists had requested this footage, they said no. No one really is interested in the truth. And at the core of what's going on is that this event was used to usher in a color revolution. Now, Joel Gilbert, who is the filmmaker behind the Trayvon Martin hoax, who shows us beyond a shadow of a doubt that Benjamin Crump is not really a civil rights attorney, but an ambulance chasing shyster who committed witness fraud. He would say that they can pick, that these cases come across Benjamin Crump's desk and he can just take it and use it for his own purposes, co-opt it. However, because of the "I can't breathe" that was stated 26 times, and what's underneath, which is really the Mexican cartel that was running a money laundering operation in cahoots with the MPD, that's really what at the core, and that they burned the evidence, Precinct 3, all of Lake Street Avenue. There was tons of damage, $2 billion outweighing Rodney King. That this was a multi-layered psyop that served many purposes. And that's been the goal of me trying to figure out, because of course there's a lot of smoke and mirrors, and it's difficult to prove because the people at the core don't want to speak. So for instance, I made contact with Maurice Lester Hall after finding out, having proof by applying to a FOIA, that he was approached to be an informant. I believe, Maurice, for the people who are listening, Maurice Lester Hall was the guy that was with George when he died. He was with Shawanda Hill, all three of them being convicted felons. Of course, I'm not justifying why his death because he's a felon. However, there's more than meets the eye. So I called him. I didn't expect him to pick up the phone, and he thought I was a mainstream journalist that was trying to organize a photo shoot. So he started talking to me, and then I explained to him I'm not. I believe this was 2 weeks ago, that he was speaking to me because he felt like he'd been abandoned. Now I'll just give a little bit of context. So this guy had outstanding warrant. He escapes and goes to Houston. He gets caught in June 2nd, 2020 as a fugitive out of state. The next day, the case is sealed, and he's found to have the early beginnings of intellectual disability, so mental illness. And then on June 4th, as all mentally ill people do, they go on Good Morning America and do the media rounds and go CNN and so on and so forth. However, it was determined in the state trial that this guy had given George drugs before, bad drugs. In March alone, George went to the hospital twice for a near overdose. I also learned from the FOIA document that he had block bleeder as a tattoo. I don't know what block bleeder meant, so I went and I looked it up, and it is someone that is a drug dealer that's hustling 24/7 and arguably had ties to the Crips. So if justice had been served, this guy would have testified. He was subpoenaed. Maurice did tell another BCA, which is the equivalent of the FBI in Minneapolis, had admitted that George had taken drugs. So his GoFundMe page, he did not raise a lot of money. I'm getting to why he talked to me. The Floyd family turned their back on him. And so he feels jilted. Also, I believe that they're holding his son. And I feel that the government is probably trying to get him to cooperate, and so therefore messing with his life. So he's trying to get his son back. He tried to sell me some footage of him and George at Chuck E. Cheese. And he also lied to me and said that the drugs were already in his system from, he didn't take drugs that day, which is incorrect and is not what he told this detective. So he was subpoenaed by Eric Nelson, who was Derek's lawyer, for the state trial, and then he pled the fifth. They tried to subpoena the detective, but for whatever reason, that didn't go through either. Every moment that they've tried to get justice or a fair trial has been foiled by the prosecution. So now this coming trial, initially they were fighting to have the cameras again. There were 23 million people who tuned in to watch the Derek Chauvin trial. However, this coming trial is not going to be televised. Maybe because it'll be more of a real trial and not just a debacle or a performance. So that, I mean, I can go down the rabbit hole in a lot of instances as to who George was, as to who Derek was or wasn't, and these other characters, Maurice, and what's really going on at the heart of the matter regarding the Sinaloa cartel and a money laundering operation. I'd like to tell your audience too that if anyone gave a crap about this man's Black life, that we would be discussing the fake fentanyl that is made by the Mexican cartel with ingredients made in China. And no one is asking those questions when fentanyl is arguably the #1 killer, even overriding the bloated COVID-19 numbers or the damages from the jabs. So that's one. Two, if they really cared about him, they would look into the fake money. So I applied for FOIA with the Secret Service, and all I got was a memorandum. The memorandum addressed the two bills, one bill that George gave Chris Martin, and then another bill that Maurice Lester Hall, you can see, rips up and throws on the ground. There was other money bills in the car that was shoved between the seats in an attempt to hide them. Those were not addressed. And more so, the memorandum doesn't even entertain where this money comes from. It's not even discussed. So this is like a Mickey Mouse trial. I believe that it's a drill. If you look at my coverage that you could see on Activist Post of the federal trial, it comes across as though the manual, the training manual is on the stand, is being scrutinized, and there's a lot of inconsistencies. For instance, the duty to intervene. So these three officers, Alexander Kang, who's Black, and Tu Tao, the Asian officer, and Thomas Lane were found guilty of basically not doing enough. They argued that they should have intervened and basically pushed Derek out of the way when, I mean, it's known that the police culture is hierarchical, that you respect and you defer to your FTO, your field training officer. In this case, that was Derek. So I don't know if there's any direction specifically you would like me to okay. Address.
So yeah, and that's really great. Now, what I want to say is that there's reason to believe that Derek is never going to actually live out his so-called sentence, and that he's basically a patsy, an actor, and he's on hire. So when you look at that situation, because I know you're talking about, you know, a fair trial and this sort of thing, but yeah, in essence, the whole thing is staged from yes, beginning to end, and all of the players appear to be actors. And in fact, Floyd there's reason to believe he isn't even dead.
Yeah,
So
I would like to say that I hear that all the time. I've looked at autopsy pictures that no one else has seen of a bloated body. I believe that maybe he wasn't supposed to die, and that's why Derek Chauvin shows up at the hospital at 9:05, like all racist cops who love police brutality do. And in reference to him being Ben Bailey or a crisis actor, I personally don't think that. I think that he's someone who's groomed, that possibly was MK Ultra. And why do I believe that? This guy studied to be a cook. He graduated with the culinary arts and ends up a cop. And then at the age of 23, he goes to the military. He goes to military police, and he spends at least 5 months in Germany. And so right now I'm looking at this combative center where he was training, and also he was in Fort Benning. So I'm trying to see what he was doing there. From what I've gleaned so far, this center in Hovenfalls, Germany, is a place where you basically do drills and you learn force on force training. And what is force on force training? It's basically to be able to anticipate or to deal with situations that are happening on the fly that are dangerous. So was this guy groomed? When you look at, I'm on the chapter of Derek Chauvin right now. One, nobody wanted to come on record to speak to him about him. The lawyer, his new lawyer, is speaking to me. His new lawyer is conservative. His new lawyer may not know the intricacies. It became very clear that I know more than the lawyer does, and the parameters in which he's appealing are very determined, and he can't, there's only certain things that he can address to try to call a new trial. However, in the media, there is nothing really about Derek, how they paint him. One, the government put out a 79-page personal file. In my 20 plus years as a journalist, I've never seen the government put out a file on a character. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe what I've covered, maybe that's normal. Two, initially someone saw my trailer that is helping raise funds for Derek. They never saw that part. In one part is a employee of Cup Foods going onto the street and saying he was high off his cracker, he probably OD'd. Now, the Palestinian Arabs of Cup Foods, one of the brothers, there's 4 brothers, 3 of them were absolute a-holes to me and did not want to talk. And there's a cover up there that I'm leaving for the book. But one of them told me they basically got caught up in a black versus white narrative and they don't fit in there. And that he agreed that Maurice was a snitch and that George also was a snitch. I believe that these guys are disposable in this new world that we live in. We glorify crooks and we imprison, like we know Mark Renan, God-loving human beings. Everything is inverted and perverse. So I know that a lot of people think that this guy's not dead. Of course, there's movie magic. If you saw the Stryker machine and he's getting resuscitated. The fact that they took a wrong turn from the Cup Foods, it's a straight shot to the hospital. And Chris Martin, the boy who took the 20, told me that he felt that the guy was dead when they put him on a gurney.
Sorry.
Another piece of footage that I saw that is on my Gab channel, as is some color footage of Cup Foods that's never been seen. In this one snippet, there's a Middle Eastern man behind Darnella Frazier. Darnella is the Pulitzer Prize winning girl who raised $700,000 for her Black life. And she conveniently comes in at the 10-minute mark and misses all the resisting before. In any case, from behind her shoulder, there's a Middle Eastern man that says he dead already. So it's perceived, everything was, you like my Middle Eastern accent.
Well, I'm just saying, but it's not really that, but I mean, it's so insane. In other words, he's trying to say Floyd was dead already, meaning.
When he was put on the gurney.
Right. So, okay, very interesting. I mean, we do know that they can substitute bodies. I'm sure that was done in Epstein's case to get him out of the prison and so on. So, and in fact, McAfee is probably a similar situation. So these things are very hard to prove one way or the other. And so I appreciate that you're kind of trying to package all of this and get it in some kind of order. But it's really an intel deception. And did you happen to look into the Paris, copycat situation? Because that also reveals that this is an Illuminati, staged thing. So I think that's a really important angle to go down.
Yes.
So go ahead.
I would like to say, yes, there was that technique is in the manual, and they made sure not to have it inspected, or they failed to bring it up in the state trial. Of course, yes, you cannot prove these things, but that's the whole beauty of these false flags. However, if you were to position it, if I were to tell you there's a money laundering operation going on, everything closes down, which is not very good because these are not essential shops and they have to clean their money. This guy's a convicted felon and he's getting antsy. He wants money. He threatens to come out or say something. No, George, you can't do it. Let's say we're going to make you Rodney 2.0. And all you have to do is, that thing you did last year, because a year, almost to the day, in May, he gets arrested. He does the whole, my mama's dead. No, your mama didn't just die. She died in 2018. He swallows pills. This time it's OxyContin, also made by the Mexican cartel. So that thing that you did, do it again. But this time, just keep saying, I can't breathe. They know at one point the I can't breathe will become real. Someone drugs him, Maurice. Maybe Derek is not told that he's also going to be a sacrificial lamb. And ultimately, I found, for instance, also in the NIH, they're very well aware that the number one demographic are Black lives. They are the number one vaccine hesitants. There was tons of focus groups that were conducted to see how they can flip the Black lives don't matter because of Tuskegee experiment to Black lives do matter. And so what if this was used to go from virus to violence? Is it just a coincidence that May 25th?
The Floyd thing happened before the whole rollout of COVID.
No, we were all being locked down May 25th, right. 2020. We were all getting antsy. And now there's
so that it happened partway into it is what you're saying.
Yes. Okay. Absolutely. There was fatigue. And so on May 25th, nobody's wearing their face diapers. Thomas Lane is wearing a baby blue one. And then there's one bystander, extra, background actor. And then there's the EMT that you can argue are not really EMT. So then on the steps, also, if we scrutinize body identification process, how long it really takes, what the process is, it's usually the medical examiner. In this case, it was the FBI. But yet at 11 a.m. the next day, Benjamin Crump is also already retained and doing a TMZ interview at 11 a.m. Central, whatever. Meanwhile, medical examiner Andrew Baker has just started cutting into George and doing an autopsy. Then at that 12 o'clock the next day, Darnella, I have this on footage, her caught, she's performing with her big fake eyelashes, crying, I caught this. And it's like, who are you talking to, lady? Then Jacob Fry, the Justin Trudeau knockoff, he's having a presser. Everybody on the steps is masked because the mask mandates have come in. So here we have people wearing their face diapers. I know when I first wore one, what came to my mind? I can't effing breathe. So it's just a coincidence that this is the slogan, and then that Eric Garner,
Oh,
who's
all right. That's a good point, actually.
so I believe that this,
The I can't breathe thing. I have to tell you that when I saw the footage and he said, I can't breathe, I didn't believe him, to be honest. I mean, that was my reaction. I didn't believe him. I also didn't believe that a man of his size could be held down even by somebody's boot on his neck. I mean, he's just too big. He was incredibly, muscular, obviously worked out. It doesn't matter that you're, under drugs. I mean, in some ways, drugs could even make you stronger. You're in a life-death situation. You want to breathe, you would just get that guy off your back. So I didn't believe the situation personally from the get-go.
well, to
Now,
add to what, sorry.
go ahead, but I just want to say that because I think it's important that there was such work put into that, as you're saying, and yet at least it didn't come off to me as realistic. He was just too big and too muscular to die in such a way. That's just my point of view. And so then you have to look at another way of what was really going on there, and, unless he was given some kind of, an injection, a hidden injection before he even, the whole thing started, when he went into the store or whatever, then maybe he was basically weakened and didn't have his strength type of thing. But he didn't, when you look at him laying on the ground there, he didn't look, like, how a body, a person is just exhausted and they melt with the ground. He didn't look like that. He looked like he was ready at any moment to just, sit back up, or, all he had to do was roll over.
Well, to address his size and the reality of what occurred. Derek is a small guy. You can see from the milestone footage from across, the wide shot that you'll see in my film and is in the trailer, the entire car is moving on its own. George Floyd's nose is bleeding. They lead you to believe that the cops were responsible. No, George bashed his face on the plexiglass twice, and that's why it's bleeding. The liquid that came underneath that, I was like, oh my God, did the guy pee on himself? No, it's exhaust. So these are little things that are used. First, and also, I just interviewed a retired cop last week. He says most of the weight is not on his knee. There's also camera perspective bias that shows from other angles that the knee was moving across the shoulder region. And there's also excited delirium. I have personally witnessed excited delirium, but in a female, you express crazy amounts of strength. Alexander Kang is on the third, fourth day of his job, and Thomas Lane. They also choose, when they do these exercise drills, there's a lot of rookies involved, whether it's Genevieve, a firefighter that just happens to be walking that day, or even the EMT, the man that saw him was a resident. He was a rookie. And they say to us that they did resuscitation for an hour. The average amount of time to try to resuscitate someone is about 20 minutes. Yeah. Let's keep resuscitating him. And if you really cared about him and increasing the chances, they did a load and go. You don't do a load and go. You treat the person at the scene. So if something went wrong or he wasn't told that he was going to die, but what happens if there's also, looking at the Freemasons, looking at a cornerstone ritual, there's also self-sacrifice. Maybe he took those drugs to go through this, and they compartmentalize, they don't tell everyone. But
but there's also, there is also, having somebody appear to die and then bring them back to life later, that, right?
Sure. Yeah, and then another
So
thing.
there's still no guarantee that he's dead. I mean, I'm just saying.
Yeah, I mean, I could show you the images. You sure they could be a body double, the big eagle
Easily,
tattoo.
easily.
Sure. I mean, but I, as a journalist, again, have to stick with what I can prove. And there's certain things that I can
Mm.
prove to this point. I want to say something else that you brought up. Oh, it is possible. If you look at the whole 30 minutes from Inside Cup Foods and you see how his mood changes. I have footage of him that no one's seen of him leaving Cup Foods and dancing across to the car. Then they tell us that he's taking a snooze because he took Percocet, but I see him open the door and out of the blue as they're kind of waiting for the cops. Because also think of this, Carrie, it's Memorial Day, you're with your friends, so I could have a fake 20. It's possible, right? Even though in January, they intercepted Minneapolis State, intercepted $800,000 of fake cash of $1 bills made in China. So you're sitting there with your friends. They come out twice. He sends out, this is where the cover up goes, but whatever, the manager sends out the boys twice to go and get their money. If it was me, I'd be like, dude, here's your 20, here's the cigarettes, leave us the F alone. We're having fun, but they come twice to try to get the money. Why does he send kids out? But then he makes the effort to show the cops come out the door and say, and when the cops come at 8:08, Thomas Lane and Alexander Kang, the door is opened, and I'm going to assume that Maurice, they know the cops are coming. There must have something been exchanged. It's very relaxed. Maurice is there. It's like they're waiting. Another thing, when the media tells us that they all met there coincidentally, BS. I have footage of them arriving together. That car is not George Floyd's car. The woman who owns the car told me that we was going to a barbecue that day, and that George was supposed to be picking up barbecue fluid and charcoal, but somehow he left with a banana and cigarettes that arguably he doesn't smoke. And of course, there's the COVID diagnosis, which is the only man on the planet that didn't get to die, and it didn't affect his respiratory issue at all. But you said something, he could have been injected. It's possible. If you look at cyanide poisoning, it's also very similar. And if you really look at fentanyl and how you die of fentanyl, it's not parallel. But regardless, there were drugs involved, and in this version of reality, this inverted, it has no role. And they bullied medical examiner. They called him a white supremacist. They pressured him. They threatened him on many different levels. And at the state trial, they couched him with all these other medical experts. And he was forced to put asphyxia, when originally he said that if he were to find this body, and he purposely didn't see the video to not be tainted, he said he would have written this off as an OD. So I believe that they got rid of George. Maurice says, that the girlfriend, Courtney Ross, and the person who owns the car don't want to speak to him. He was a bad guy, and that he was involved because he gave him drugs. And he says, if I was so guilty, why would George on his deathbed say, Reese, I love you? If you go and you listen to his script of, at one point I joke, Carrie, he says, I think I need some water. So if you, boys and girls out there, if you imagine you're given the talk, when you get caught by the cops, you get stopped, you put your hands on the wheel, you turn off whatever purple, if you're purple, black, white, whatever, you are told to do this. If you look at his resisting, you're like, who's this whiny bitch? And then he says, I need some water. And I say, oh, George, would you like some water? Would you like a menu? Are you good? You want to order some food? You're being arrested. So if you were to listen to everything that's being said with the lens of He knows this is happening. He's choosing, it's part of the Freemasonic corner ritual, self-sacrifice, that he will live, he will be immortal, that perhaps he had no choice because he was beholden to the Sinaloa cartel. And if you look at the Sinaloa, they're not very nice.
Okay, well, I understand that. I don't know. What about, you haven't really gotten into the fact that Derek and Floyd knew each other and worked together.
Get into that too. I can get into all of it. I've looked at
Okay.
every,
I mean, I appreciate what you're doing and your flexibility here, but I'm just curious.
yeah, absolutely. And my book will be a lot more organized, and the coverage. I recently wrote an article to kind of sum up where it's at. Okay, so these two guys on George Floyd's death certificate, which I applied for a FOIA, even though it's not certified, it says El Nuevo. So, and we know that Derek worked at El Nuevo. And early on, David Pinney came forth and did a 50-minute interview with CBS, saying that these guys butted heads and they knew each other. And then 48 hours later, it was pulled. I went to try to license that interview, but because it was recanted, I am not allowed to license it. And so then David Pinney said that he's bad with faces and that he mixed George up with someone else, which is racist in itself, because George is 6'6". He's all black people look alike, And so he recanted it, and you can't access that interview. Now, I've spoken to several people that says these guys knew each other, and they added the word well. And then I've had other people to say El Nuevo is a big club. It was several thousand square feet. However, I have court documents that say that the security guards and the bouncers had communication. I've worked at a club when I was much, much younger, and sure, I didn't know everybody, but I knew their faces. And but one thing, Carrie, I've seen the video over and over, all the different angles. There's tons of different angles. And I look at the moment where Derek comes forth and there's no recognition. So is it because he's MK Ultra and one of them is high off? Or I concluded that the only way these guys didn't recognize each other is if someone told them, do not recognize each other.
Right.
I find that really hard to believe. Now, again, two of the officers are rookies. And irony is that Derek was not supposed to be at work that day, got called in for whatever reason. They were about to have lunch, him and Tutau, and the backup was called. The backup was canceled. And then Tutau says, I told Derek, let's go anyways, because these guys are rookies and they're in gangland. I interviewed a real activist against police brutality, and she laughed and she said, anybody that knows what's really going on knows that the Bloods work with the cops. So there is no question in my mind that the MPD is hella corrupt. However, by imprisoning Derek, whether he's a patsy or really goes to jail or not, does that justify? And in these sick rituals, you sacrifice someone and they symbolize, it atones, right? It atones, but it doesn't really atone. So I've looked very much into the Freemasonic rituals. Just to finish your question, answering your question, that ultimately, for me to really do this properly, I must now go to Minneapolis. And I was told by someone that if you really want to know the truth, you need to come on the scene. I'd like to also tell people that I own George Floyd's debt. So I paid Cup Foods $20 so that I have his Social Security, and I wanted to look it up legitimately so that I can see what his finances, although I haven't been successful in that. But just, yeah, so I believe.
Well, I mean, let me say that it would be very dangerous for you to go there because this is not.
No, I know.
Your evidence is not going to be popular, and there's going to be a lot of people that may have reason
Yes.
to doubt your motives and this sort of thing. So I just personally would advise against it. Perhaps if you sent somebody, a guy, specifically a guy, who maybe could handle himself with even being armed, but somehow, or not, but somebody who knew how to handle himself, an undercover person, in other words, pay someone to do something like that. But for you to go as a woman under these circumstances in that atmosphere, which I'm sure prevails, because this became like a huge cause celeb, as they say, which we haven't really touched on, but I think that's also insane. So he became like the poster boy for these people. If I remember, they're erecting the statue. I don't know if they did it already, right?
I don't know if it's been toppled. I haven't kept track of the homages other than the
Okay,
lightning,
okay.
the
Well,
lightning.
neither have I, but you know what I'm saying? I heard rumors of that. So just saying that this situation is not,
Yes.
it's over in a certain sense, but it's not over because of the Black Lives Matter and how it became such a big deal.
Yeah,
And how certain people have like grandstanded on this issue over and over again, and just an unbelievable homage paid to this man. They made him a hero. So,
I hear.
it's so insane that it's completely suspect. I agree.
I was told to get safety. I've raised $1 million for my film. I have not been able to raise half of what I just want to pay my editor and cover the thousands of dollars. I believe that even the Give, Send, Go is shadow banned because I'm the real thing. I'm not bullshit. I was told to get protection, that the Sinaloa cartel does not mess around. And I do not doubt that. And I had a media professor that I was speaking to, I was trying to find interns to help me because of all the attacks and trying to get some student. And this guy worked in Hollywood. He's a media professor. And he tells his students not to look at Wikipedia because it's not reliable. So the next day, on the phone, he just said, well, if you don't think these cops should spend the rest of their lives in jail, I don't really want to talk to you. And then the next day he sent me my Wikipedia page, which has recently been co-opted. And now I'm a Q follower, which is, I would tell you, I'm not ashamed of who I am and what I believe. But
well,
I've never.
I think I don't even know if I have one anymore, but I did, and it was full of lies. So I never believed Wikipedia ever since then. And I can tell you that was many years ago. So no, that's basically a complete PSYOP operation.
Totally.
And I think it's known to be. I do want to say that in terms of, I think maybe we should go down this road. What is your motivation? A little deeper, because you did sort of initially say that, you wanted, I think it's insane to even say you want a fair trial, because the whole thing is such an operation that the trial seems like a, I don't know, an afterthought, if anything.
That's not my motivation. That's not my motivation, but I do think it's just us and not justice. And I do think that this trial, whether people realize it or not, after the fact, there was Operation Safety Net, which was a huge AI recognition. They used it as an excuse. George Floyd, we have to keep the people safe. And there's a lot of different operations that are going on that are stripping us of our privacy, and that cops will be replaced with robocops. But it's kind of accidental. I was in the jungle, and Zach Voorhees, the Google whistleblower, it was May 25th, and he's like, hey, Mimi, can you come and choke me? And I was like, what? He's like, I'm doing the George Floyd challenge. So I hesitantly put my knee on his neck, and he could breathe. And then I said, well, if you really want to know how he died, we have to call the medical examiner. So the next day I called the medical examiner, And they told me that it would take weeks and weeks and weeks for an official report. And yet hours later, CNN leaked these preliminary, which was purposeful to sow discord and rile up the masses and justify the riots that we're going to pursue. So that was one thing. Then I interviewed Giovanni Thunstrom, who was his employer at La Conga. This is like May 27th. And I'm very perceptive. I work with intuition and hunches. And I was like, this guy has like these broad talking points, like he was strangulated. Look at the urine, white, black. He worked outside. He worked inside. It just felt very kind of contrived. He mentioned Maya Santamaria, who's the owner of the El Nuevo. El Nuevo was housed in the Oddfellows building. So then finally, the other thing that really like was like, okay, I'm gonna keep going, is that the Bridget, the supposed sister, was on TMZ or doing the rounds, and she had a shirt that said, "I can't breathe." And I was like, oh, are print shops essential? Where'd you get that t-shirt, honey? Did someone FedEx it to you overnight? Are you gonna wear your brother's last words? I don't find that very tasteful. So then I went and I did George Floyd, "I Can't Breathe," Benjamin Crump. And whoa, Eric Garner also said "I can't breathe" 11 times. And he was also represented by Benjamin Crump. So it was one thing after the other. And I felt like I was told, don't tap out of this, Maryam, and real investigations take time. And then when the state trial came along, and I'm like, why don't I write a book? This is such a juicy story. I can't get into the details. We know that we live in an age of mediocrity, Carrie, where nobody cares about the details. I do. I'm a Virgo rising. I'm very much into details. And when you read the story and you learn about Cup Foods and you learn about El Nuevo and you learn about Derek and you learn about George, it's an amazing story. And it's been quite a lot of fun to investigate as I'm writing. So that's why it's, if someone was like, oh, let me tell you the psyop of Breonna Taylor, I probably wouldn't care. But once you get underneath and I start talking to people, they're like, wow, this is fascinating. When you find out the Sinaloa cartel aspect, the money laundering aspect, the drug aspect, the bloods aspect, the crookedness of the MPD. So yeah.
Okay, well, I think that that's very well said. And I think it will help people maybe to understand a little better. So in terms of what you are, you're going to do now, and also kind of, you said, is your book done or you're in the process? And I think what will determine, let's say, I don't know, your safety is the kind of conclusion you bring to the book. Raising the questions is one thing, trying to come to a conclusion is another thing. So how do you view that? And maybe you can talk about that a little.
That's a very good point, Carrie. Yeah. People are like, well, what happened? First of all, this is a false flag. They purposely, the smoke and mirrors, you could spend the rest of your life trying to figure out the positioning of the smoke and mirrors. That's not what I'm doing. This is a multi-layered psyop examined. This is the title of my book. And only in the end do I give my personal theory based on the evidence that I have found. So it's not, I'm trying to solve this regarding whether I'm going to piss people off. And I did think about the Minneapolis thing, and I don't think hiring someone, I think they could suss things out, because I've realized in these past 2 years that I really do work on an energetic, intuitive level in perception that most people, I'm sure you would agree, don't. But I could bring a bodyguard. And so I'm on my Derek Chauvin trial. I'm 80% finished. The goal had been to marry it with the trial of the 3 officers, which will probably conclude August 20th-ish. So I'm not going to make that deadline, unfortunately, because I'm also working on a documentary that is in the works. It's to complement the book, because I really, for myself, wanted to, they sat on the body worn footage. So Keith Ellison purposely sat on the body worn footage. It was leaked. And a lot of synchronistic things have happened to be like, maybe I'm the journalist that's supposed to, for whatever reason, for the history books, for anyone who cares about truth, to document this, because, and then I have an advantage because most people are not paying attention. They're not on the mncourts.gov every day or speaking to Derek's lawyer. So for whatever it's worth, it will be out there. And my goal is not to profit on George, but I would like to cover my costs. I have spent thousands of dollars on these exhibits. They were $8 a piece. And the second round was, I bought 200 pieces of exhibit, and I saw footage that no one else has witnessed. Again, I'm just trying to, in earnest, very curious to know what happened. And I do agree that people are not only going to speak to me so much if I go there in person, that I have a more likelihood to find out the truth. It's the truth. The truth is, who knew the truth would become so dangerous? And
the truth is appearing to be always dangerous at this point. The longer I'm in this game, but I appreciate, your energy and that you bring to the story, and I think that everyone else will as well. Best of luck with your book. We have to wrap this up now because I've got a lot of other things going on simultaneous with this breaking news story. So, but I want to thank you very much for your patience with this process today, and you've done a great job as usual. And I think there's maybe more to even discuss. So let's keep the door open and see where you go in the next coming days and weeks and months. And I think that it's possible, if you were to get what I call kind of like a whistleblower or a deep witness that, doesn't have to come forward, but could leak information to you, that would put you in a completely different situation. Because with stories like this, that's what you really need. So just throwing that out, okay, for my audience. And of course, you never know who could be watching.
yeah, absolutely. I can tell you that I've posted on Craigslist if anyone has any information between George and Derek, and within an hour it was flagged. And as far as whistleblowers, that having an owner of the store and interviewed Chris Martin and interviewed Maurice Lester Hall, and that I have discovered a cover-up, like I've said, that I'm not sharing until the book. So I will keep on praying and hoping that someone will come forth. And also, like, for instance, proving that he wasn't even there that day. He was there to go to a barbecue, and that's not even his car. In the book, again, I can get into more details. I would like to invite people to go to Activist Post. They can read, I've written 50 plus articles about the trials and this federal trial. I'll be covering the upcoming trial, and they can also go to my Gab TV, which is Lady B. And I've dropped a couple of never before seen clips that I've accessed through the court systems, and that I would ask for any support that I'm giving advance copies. Like, so if you make a pledge, I am just trying to cover my costs and be supported. So I very much appreciate the time that you've given me, Carrie.
Okay. Thank you very much for being here, and take care.
Thank you, Carrie. Bye-bye. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye. And thanks for watching, everyone.